Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk today about things that just make sense and that do not make sense when living in Ireland. And of course, this is from an American perspective. I'll be talking about this while I take a drive to Limerick from Tipperary, so enjoy the view. Jumping right into it, what makes sense, and in no particular order, is when you're going to college, you are able to focus your entire time on your major, which just makes a lot of sense because versus in the States, you still have to do 2 years of general studies. It could have nothing to do with your major, whereas here you spend the full 4 years diving into your major, and I just feel like you get more information on what you're studying. They have something here called child allowance or benefit, which is a government payout basically, which is €140 a month per child up to their 18th birthday, as long as they are in full-time education. And this is regardless of your income level. And I think it's just something really handy to just give that little bit. I know 140 isn't very much. It doesn't cover their entire cost by any means, but it just helps give that little bit to help with the cost of childcare. Something else, they have a lot of ways that you can take breaks from your job, essentially. There is parents' leave, where either parent can take up to 7 weeks leave before the child turns 2. There is also parental leave, which lets parents take unpaid leave from work to spend time looking after their child. You can take up to 26 weeks parental leave for each eligible child before their 12th birthday. I have worked with many people who might have a set day every week or two that they do not come into work in order to spend more time with their child or children. But you can also take this out in chunks, so it doesn't have to be one day at a time. And the child's other parent is entitled to the same, separate from your own. There is also something called job share. This is where 2 people work in tandem to split one full-time job position. This often is like 1 week on, 1 week off for each, or it could be every couple of days, just kind of depending. But it's a nice way to work with an establishment that's only looking to hire for a full-time position if a part-time position isn't available. Lastly, there is a career break. This you definitely have to be approved by your employer for, but it is an option. It is another form of unpaid leave while staying employed, and it is no less than 6 months and no more than 3 to 5 years at a time, just depending on the reason. You can apply to take a maximum of 3 career breaks, which when combined cannot exceed 12 years in total. But it's a nice way to take a break if you need to and still maintain the job that you're in. Something else that makes sense here is when you want to use a shopping cart, or here they call it a trolley. They each have a little box attached to a chain and all the carts attached to each other. The only way to release one is for you to insert a 1 or 2 euro coin. And the only way to get your coin back is by attaching the cart back into the station with the other carts when you're finished using it. I will say it is very rare that you see a cart out in a parking lot or misplaced. They're almost always returned back because people want their money returned to them. So it's a very clever way to ensure that all the carts are put back and everything's nice and neat and tidy and that cars aren't bumping into these carts all over the place. Something else here that I really love is that they have N and L plates on their cars. So it's this big white sticker with either an N or an L in red on both the front and the back of the car. So when you have your provisional license, you would have a L plate, which is to say that you're a learner driver. And this kind of alerts everybody that you're very new to the road. You're not meant to be driving by yourself, so it's another kind of indicator for everyone else. But as well, once you do have your license, you still have to wear an N plate, which is to say that you're still a new driver, and this you have to keep on your car for 2 years. Again, it's just a kind of a nice way to let other cars on the road know that you're still getting used to everything, you're still learning, so it's a nice way to just keep everybody informed on the road. Something you'll hear a lot here is weather warnings, and they do a color scheme, so if you hear on the news or people talking about a yellow warning, it's issued for if there's kind of localized danger, if it's just kind of to be cautious on the roadway. it moves up to orange if it's just that little bit more dangerous. And a red weather warning is the most extreme. So you would be extremely careful. You'd avoid travel. Schools could be shut down. So very much it could be that they're worried of trees coming down in the roadway from the wind, there being a lot of ice around. Sometimes in some places here it can snow. It's not very often, but it does happen. So it's just a nice way of when the weather warnings come out and the color that you're given, you know what to expect and how cautious and careful that you need to be. Something else that I think just makes a lot of sense here, back home where we would call it a bill, here they would call it a note for their money. Each would have a different size and color depending on its value. So the €5 note would be that bit smaller. It would be green. You jump up to a €10 note. It would be kind of an orange color and it would be a little bit bigger. And it just goes up from there. And it just kind of makes when you're rifling through your money that little bit easier. Something you have to love is that there is no sales tax here. So when you're looking in the shops and you see something, let's say that's €1, you go up to the till to pay and you only pay that €1. They also have donation banks here. So in a lot of shopping centers, there will be maybe a corner with a few of these large boxes, we could call them, and that's where you go to donate your bags of clothes. It can be to different centers that you want to donate to, but it just makes it really easy. So it really encourages people. They don't have an excuse when you have your bag of clothes for donations sitting in your car that it's just too easy to go pop it in. A lot of times you'll be driving past one, and so you kind of have no excuse. And I think it just makes things really simple. And lastly, something that they do here that just makes so much sense is that if you have taken a class in college and say you're in your final exam, you could be sick, you could have something that has happened to you, you're just not in your right mind. If you had maintained good grades the whole way through and then you just bomb that final, you're actually able to retake it at the end of summer. Now you are capped at a C grade no matter what your actual score is, but it just allows you that second chance that you can still pass the class, you can still graduate, let's say, instead of having to retake the entire thing over again, that you can retake that exam. Now moving on to things that do not make sense, or maybe they do make sense and they're just kind of hard to accept. One thing is your VAT fees, which is value added tax. A lot of the things that you purchase, like I said, the sales tax would be, this kind of tax would be included in there. So it's no extra charge at the till. However, if you're buying something that's outside of the EU, you will be charged this. So if you're ordering something from Amazon, it's coming over from the UK, you will have to pay an extra tax on it. Same thing, even if you get, let's say someone sends you a package from back home, there will be a customs charge, which you have to pay before they will deliver it to you. And not to say that those are both the same thing, but just to say that there can be these extra fees or charges that you're not necessarily expecting when something's being sent over or you're purchasing something. So it can just be that little bit frustrating. Something else that can be a little frustrating that maybe doesn't exactly make sense when you're trying to do it is that you need a separate driving license to drive a manual car. This would be called your full driver's license. So as to say that you can get into a manual car and drive it. So this proves that you took your test in a manual car. Then that's the only way that you're allowed to drive it and be insured on a car. So even if you come over and you know how to drive it, you still cannot drive in a automatic car for your test and then go away and drive a manual car at any point without that extra bit to your license. And unfortunately, when you take your test here, there are some real party tricks that you have to do. So you have to reverse around a corner, do a 3-point turn, and do a hill start. And these are quite tricky in a manual car. So you do have to really know it quite well before you're licensed and you're allowed onto the road. Now, in a way, this next one, I can understand how it makes sense, but it again can be frustrating. So when you work a second job here in Ireland, I know there's something with tax credits and a way to balance that, but essentially you're most likely going to be taxed at a higher rate for your second job. So it's really not even worth your while having a second job. I can understand how this discourages people from taking on extra employment when jobs are really quite hard to find at the moment for anyone. So it's kind of making sure nobody gets any bit extra and leaving anybody behind. But at the same time, when you're trying to kind of get ahead, you're trying to make that little bit of extra money for something in your future or something you're trying to do, it can make getting a little extra income that bit tricky because a lot of it is taxed away from you. Something else that can just be that little bit hard is that the roads can be very narrow here. They can be not very well marked. It's oftentimes that you're trying to find a road to turn down and it doesn't say what the name of the road is. You can be driving along and all of a sudden your lane has turned into a turn lane and you had no idea. There was no pre-warning. It's just like you have to have been from that area and know what the roads are like. And unfortunately, I think a lot of these towns, the houses were built before people really had cars, especially two-car households. So the cars are parked in the roadway and kind of half on the sidewalk, half in the road, but it does make a lot of congestion because you have to wait for cars to pass through. There's not really enough room for there to be cars parked on both sides of the road and for there to be two-way traffic. So it can make for a lot of congestion, a lot of issues. And it's just something that you just wish the roads were a little bit wider, that they were a little better marked. It's just something you have to live with when you live here. Something that surprised me when I first moved here is that none of the windows on the houses have screens on them. So especially in the summer, or even if it's just a nice day, if you want to have your windows open, you're kind of just allowing any little fly, any little bug to come flying in, crawling in, or what have you. So I found that quite interesting. Unfortunately, here you cannot yield on a red. I know in the States, you can't even do that in every state, but where I'm from, if it's a red light, you're still able to turn right and turn into traffic, which I think moves things along. Unfortunately, that's not something you're allowed to do here. So if the light is red, you are there until it's green. So I do wish they had that rule here that you're able to yield into traffic even on a red light. Something I miss terribly is garbage disposals. It's unfortunate that they're not more of a thing here. I think if you're building a house on your own, or you can request one to be put in, but certainly most houses here, they just wouldn't have them. This country certainly is more catered to the wet and the cold, and it certainly is more chilly throughout the year, but not to say that it doesn't get quite warm in the summer as well. But you'll find that every house, they have a pretty good heating system, but not much of a cooling system. So there won't be any ceiling fans. There isn't really an AC unit that I've ever really seen, certainly not in the homes. So everywhere you go, you do have to just have a freestanding fan that comes with you. And it's just something to be ready for in the summertime. Unfortunately, before you see any specialist, you do have to have a referral from your general practice doctor. This can really slow down the process, unfortunately, and there aren't many specialists. I think there's maybe a shortage. I'm not sure what's going on, but I needed a dermatology appointment, and I got a letter in the mail letting me know when that was going to be. Of course, after I had gone to my doctor, gotten the referral, they sent it on, and my appointment is not for another 9 months. So this is something that can be quite frustrating. Again, it doesn't quite make sense. You wish the system was a little bit different than what it is, but that's something to get used to. Lastly, a lot of the petrol stations where you're filling up your petrol or your gas, the machine where you fill up at the pump, it doesn't take your card there. Now, in a way, I do love this because it just shows what a trusting country it is. How easy it could be to fill up your gas tank and then just take off. Of course, nobody does that. You do have to go inside, tell them what pump number, and then pay for it. So there's not often a machine that can take your card at the pump. But the only thing is that this oftentimes can leave people waiting. So if it's kind of during a busy time, a high traffic time, you can be sat there waiting a little bit longer because everyone does have to take that time to go in. Oftentimes people are kind of tempted to shop around a little bit, get a little drink, get a little snack. And so it just leaves for there to be more time when you go to the petrol station. It just takes that little bit of extra time to complete the task. So that's my list. That's my experience. That's everything that I can think of, that just things that just make sense here. And I wish that the whole world could adapt to these things that just make sense. And then there are those things that just make a little less sense and it can be a little bit frustrating, and that you wish there was just something in the system that made it a little bit different than it is. But as always, it does not mean that this is not an absolutely wonderful place to live. I always say I always would recommend somebody coming here, and I certainly would hope everybody gets the chance to at least visit once in their life.